Sam, there were no baseball cliches. There was no long, wordy explanation. There were absolutely no excuses made. He just said, I tried with all my heart. I'm just not good anymore. And that's the way Joey Votto left the game of baseball.
Yep.
That happened last night. How'd that hit you?
In the moment, I think that it made sense. I think it felt like all the stars aligned. It would have felt more like the stars aligned had he got called up with the Toronto Blue Jays and gotten to play. But I think that was the marker for him, that if I'm not up by this time, then I think he was preparing for that, to play in Toronto against the Reds, and that would have been a big circle moment. But to reflect on his career, it was humbling, I guess, for me. I was like, man, while you're in the game with him, you don't think of it like that. He's your teammate. He's really good, but then you start looking at numbers of where he's all-time ranks in the Reds history, and it's like, oh shit, this guy's real good. So, I mean, good for him. I think that if he was ready to do it, then it was time, and I didn't think he should linger on. So good for him. What a career, man.
What a career. And with that, we say welcome to Dead Red Cincinnati. Brian Giesenschlag, former Red, Sam LeCure. This show will be, in large part, about Votto's announcement, Votto's career, his time with you as a teammate, his time in Cincinnati, which goes down in the books now as 17 seasons in one uniform. Not unlike the guy we had on last week who went 19 seasons in one uniform and went to the Hall of Fame. So there's some parallels there with Reds greats.
Yep.
For Larkin, Votto, and some of the recent guys we've talked about. But before we get to some Reds conversation, and certainly promise to come back to more of the Votto conversation later in the show, I wanted to go back to what you just said. And you said, maybe this is the way, maybe this was the perfect way. Or maybe Votto coming to play for the Jays against the Reds would have been the perfect way. And I would disagree slightly. Because certainly in spring training, when he signs a minor league deal with the Jays, that's everyone's thought is, one, when's he going to get up? Yeah, when's he going to get up? And man, won't it be perfect if when the Reds get to Toronto in August, he gets the chance to play for his childhood team in his hometown against his team that he played 17 seasons for. And that's the dream, right? But when that didn't happen, when you look at what actually did happen, how he announced it in Buffalo at a AAA ballpark with a picture of his AAA locker, and then drives 100 miles from Buffalo to Toronto, has car trouble, and gets there late, and then after the Reds take the series and are about to get on the bus and go to the airport, without most of them knowing it, Joey Votto shows up in the clubhouse. So he got his moment in that series with those two teams that mean so much to him, but he got it in a way that you couldn't have written that. You couldn't have written that he shows up in shorts and sneakers at the end of the night and gets to hug Freddie Benavidez and gets to hug David Bell, Tyler Stevenson, Luke Maile, some of those guys. But that's how it happened. And then he sat in a batting cage and did his media to talk about his retirement. Joey Votto didn't need to wear a suit and tie to the interview conference room at a ballpark to do his retirement Q&A. He sat in a batting cage in a ballpark in a T-shirt and shorts with those two teams as the backdrop and explained why he quit. And the beauty of the explanation is I quit because I'm not good anymore. And they say it's better to leave early than to stay a day late. And you can debate whether Votto did one of those two things, but I just thought when I saw the pictures and had the mental image of him walking down the hall in shorts, I thought all of that was a much better story than retiring what you would consider a traditional retirement announcement.
I didn't know any of that. First of all, I was working, but no, that's really cool. And you get a little trouble with the Ferrari. and you got to get up to, you got to get up to Toronto, and it wasn't just a ballpark, and it wasn't just a team that was there. It was, his ball. Well, I say his ballpark, a ballpark he grew up and has to, and what a special night for the Reds guys, to be a part, for him to make them a part of that. He just wanted to have, one more night in the batting cage with his boys around. Now, probably made for a little later arrival into Pittsburgh, but I would bet you that every guy on that roster and every guy on that coaching staff would sacrifice an extra hour of sleep to get there and listen to Joey talk about it, because part of it is you never know what's going to come out of his mouth. It's going to be well thought out. I don't think Joey ever really did anything on accident. Like, I think that Joey got thrown out of his last major league game semi on purpose. I think he wanted to say, because I was like watching the video of that and him going back to the dugout in Busch Stadium, and like the guys kind of look at him and like chuckling as he's going down the tunnel, like he told him he was going to do it. Like, I don't think there's ever been a guy, certainly not a future Hall of Famer, ever get thrown out of his last major league game. And I think that was his thought. And I think that's why I thought he was considering this series against the Reds as something. If it didn't happen, then it wasn't going to happen. If he couldn't make it happen by the middle of August, 4.5 months to prepare his body and get help, all these things. If he couldn't make it happen by then it wasn't going to happen. And to go up to Toronto and spend that time with that media, there's a lot of guys that were up there media-wise who have been covering him for a long time. To share some of that with them, give them a one-stop shop so he doesn't have to be on the phone for the next, month answering phone calls and doing podcasts and all these things, just kind of get it out of the way a little bit and spend some time giving back to, those younger guys who there's not a ton on that Reds roster, but that admire him and, that probably learned a lot from him. So, I didn't know that until you just said it. So that's pretty cool.
For Votto, it always was and still was when he did this about respect for the game. People suggested, hey, the Jays should have just brought him up for the series. And he said, no, that's not how it works. I had to earn it. He said that from the start. I had to earn it, and I didn't earn it. I wasn't good enough. He wanted to. He tried. He said it would have been awful, though, if anything like that had presented itself, because he didn't deserve it. It was about respect for the game. I think that's how he approached his last season in Cincinnati. He was there and certainly believed he could still help, and did in so many ways. Yeah. But about hanging on, he always said he understood the decision because he didn't think that was the decision that was best for the game or best for the team and respectful of the game. And so he did that. But he turns 41 years old in a couple of weeks. 41 in a couple of weeks. And Joey Votto, one of the all-time greats in a Reds uniform, hangs it up. And now he said, look, I don't know what I'm going to do outside of continue my online Spanish courses. And he'll travel and do whatever. But we'll see. It'll be interesting to see. We've always wondered, I think you did as a teammate, we did in the media, we always wondered when baseball wasn't what he did anymore, what's next? In true Votto fashion, I think he'll probably surprise some folks.
There's part of me that wonders if he'll kind of, ride off into the sunset a little bit and not be heard from. I think that later in his career, I would have definitely thought that
early.
1,000% I would have thought that, when we were playing together. I was like, you'll never hear from this guy again. As his career went on and, certainly towards the later years, he really embraced the youth of what he was doing. We were there and it was Arthur Rhodes and Scott Rowland, and there was a way that you went about it. And I think Joey loved that too. That's when those were his best years. His best years as a ball player were those years. And I'd be interested to ask him that specific question. Which part of your career did you enjoy most? The part where you were the best player in baseball, or the part where you were having more fun than maybe anybody in baseball?
I think he would love that question.
I think he would too. And I kind of think he'd say the latter part, where he was just having fun. Because he was still good, because he was still pretty good too. That's an interesting question that I'd be curious about. So, yeah, now what's he going to do? I think he wants to stay relevant. I think he wants to be, somewhat of a conversation topic. Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? Well, where in the world is Joey Votto? What's he doing these days? Is he driving that bus? Is he, Annie said last night on the postgame show, you didn't watch it, Brian, but
I did not.
I'm just ribbing. You know, would he want to get back in a booth somewhere? I don't know. There are questions, and I don't. Those are questions that other people ask. Look, I want Joey to go. I don't care what Joey does because it's going to be exactly what Joey wants, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this is the time, and that's that's his privilege for the career that he had. Is now he can go do whatever the beep he wants, So, but pretty cool. I'll continue to reflect as this is,
Yeah.
in the news feed over the next few days. Reflect on, I was already like kind of what I thought about last night when I got home. I was like, he was all over the internet feed, and I was like thinking of my top X amount of Joey moments or interactions, whatever it was. I think there's probably a lot of people that are thinking about that today.
No doubt. We'll circle back to Joey Votto in just a bit, but right now the current Cincinnati Reds in the leadoff spot today. Sam, you sweep the Cardinals, get completely decimated and swept by the Royals in the very next series, and then go to Toronto and win the series, but get blown out in the middle game.
Yeah.
Here we are again having this same Jekyll and Hyde conversation about this team that we had 3 months ago. Where do you stand right now with the inconsistencies, the highs and lows of this Reds team in August?
I mean, it doesn't give me a ton of optimism, which it just sucks to say that because I mean, they do have those moments where I'm like, there it is. Oh, there it is. That's going to stick. And then last night's game was kind of a game like we haven't seen this year,
Right.
where they needed to score runs and slug their way into a game, and they did it.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been, I mean, rare because it's either they'll pitch really well and win, 8-1, or they won't and they'll get beat 10-3. When they've won games, it's been, the 2-1s and 3-2s where their pitching kind of held up. They held their head up and got it done. But it's been rare where the offense went out on a night where the pitching was off and won the game. So I thought that was something different that I'd seen. That was an outlier. But as far as the Jekyll and Hyde goes, that's not been an outlier. It's been that way all year. Oh, you go in, you sweep the Yankees, and then get swept by the Tigers. You sweep seems like every time they've swept somebody, they've followed it up with getting swept. I mean, and sweeps are hard to come by, but they do them back to back, and then it's one or the other. So it's, where do I stand? I stand on frustration. I stand on a soapbox, because it has been, because they have certainly shown abilities throughout the year to look like the team that we, mostly expected, not all the way because they're still missing pieces. But, like Barry said last week, it's like, man, no, we're not making excuses. Like, you have who you have, and are they still good enough to go out and win ball games? If you can win one, you can win another one. So it continues to be frustrating. I don't know where they go. I mean, they're going to go in and face a struggling Pittsburgh team. And, right off the bat, you get Paul Skeens a night after you had this kind of offensive eruption. So it's going to look, I'm anticipating it's going to look like Mr. Hyde or whoever the non-scoring, because he's good, right? I mean, so it's going to look like that. And you have to figure some of those things in, but it's not like every time they score 10 runs, the next day they're facing the Cy Young winner. It's just, it could be they're facing Sam LeCure and they go out there and get carved up. So I hate coming to the ballpark or, trying to broadcast this or predict this stuff and have no idea what I'm going to get that day. I have no idea who's going to show up. And that is, if the roster itself was one individual player, I wouldn't sign him because I want to know. and this is me. Now, is the ups so this, but Major League Baseball would, because the upside's high.
Mm-hmm.
But the downside, they don't think about that. They'll find somebody else to do it. But if it was one player, I wouldn't sign him because I want to know what I'm going to get. I want to know that you're going to hit 280 with 25 home runs and 80 RBIs. I want to know that out of the bullpen, you're going to take the ball every day and you're going to have that ERA can be skewed out of the bullpen. But as a starting pitcher, I want to know that you're going to take the ball and you're going to have this is going to be your area. I want to know that. And there's comfortability in that. And I don't know that about this team. So it's frustrating. And obviously, there's only going to be so long, basically the rest of this year, where we can say, it's a young team. Next year, that shit's out the door. Like, now you've got a year of experience, whoever you are. That ain't going to cut it no more. And there'll be more of a full they'll have a more full complement of players next year. But I don't want to look to next year right now. I'm not, but I'm starting to get a little bit of a lazy eye heading that way.
That's a great point, though, about if it were one player. And so as we get to this time of the year when everybody's back to school or back to college, and you think about learning or education. I was wondering yesterday, coming back home, what have we learned this season about the Reds? We know that they've been inconsistent. Factually, statistically, they've been inconsistent. But have we learned anything about the roster you just talked about, or the players, or the makeup? What have we learned? Have you given that any thought that way, or does anything come to mind?
Well, I mean, as you're posing the question, what have we learned? I think that we've learned that there is ability, there is a light somewhere, because kind of like I was saying, if you've won one game, you can win another. If you've hit one home run in the big leagues, like, can you hit another? And I think that they have guys that have hit homers that can hit another one. And I think their pitching staff took big leaps forward. It looks not good right now with Hunter down, and Nick hasn't quite found it. But we saw Nick for the stretch of games. I mean, he said after his last time out, it's unacceptable. I need to be that guy. I know I can be that guy. I've proven it. Right. You got to prove it a lot more than for a 2-month stretch to be a really good big leaguer. Right. So they have pieces that I've seen. So what I've learned is that if this roster comes together, it has to happen pretty perfectly for every team every year to win it. There's got to be health involved, but I mean, I don't even know who won the World Series. Oh, the Rangers. They didn't have Jacob deGrom, and Max Scherzer was kind of limping down the stretch. But they were hot, so it worked. The Dodgers have lost several guys this year. A lot of things have to go right. And I look at this roster and I'm like, if a lot of things go right for this team, you're knocking on somebody's door and they don't want to answer it. So I've learned that I do still like the upside of this team. I'm not going to shy away from that. But it just has to happen more often. I do like the makeup of this team. I think that they've been consistent, boringly consistent in their message. Where we're going to do everything we can and we stick to our process and all this crap that, I repeat myself on our shows because it's hard to be, what's the word I'm looking for? Original 160 games a year. It's hard for those guys to come up with some kind of a different answer. Well, why'd you guys suck today? Well, I don't know. We just got outplayed. We'll stick to the process, blah, blah. So there's a lot of that part, but I mean, I like him moving forward. I don't, I'm not anticipating a playoff spot this year, but I am next year, or I'll be frustrated.
All right, 35 games as we speak. 35 games left for the old Redlegs, and like I said, they're not without intrigue.
No,
you get to a point in this season. You get to a point in this season where, as you said, you look at the standings, and it's realistically it's not there,
right?
But still. I'm still curious when I turn it on. When we sit there and go to the ballpark, I'm still curious what happens. They have piqued my interest in that way.
The shortstop helps.
For that very reason, the shortstop has been phenomenal, and we'll do that another day.
He helps.
All right, now, instead of 5 and dive today, let's go roughly 5 good minutes with a little bit more Joey Votto. And I kind of dug into his Instagram posts and some of the things he said in announcing his retirement and wanted to run that past you. But before that, do you remember your first encounter or your first impression
yeah.
with number 19? When did you run into that guy and what did you think? Because you're coming up as he's the best player in the game, winning the MVP in 2010.
Well, I go back a couple.
I know you know him before that.
Well, so my first remembrance of him is in the minor leagues. So in minor league spring training, there's big leaguers, but they'll send big leaguers down to the minor league fields to get extra at bats. And they sent him down, and him and Norris Hopper. And I remember whatever it was, maybe Norris. I had him. Blah. He's not part of the story. The first pitch I throw to Joey, the notably patient hitter that he was already. I mean, he'd been in the big leagues. I had not, but I threw a pitch and I remember it was, probably a pretty run of the mill fastball about 4 inches off the outside portion of the plate. And he hit it to right center field so hard that I was like, why?
First pitch.
I was the first pitch. I was like, why am I even here? I was like, he's hitting that pitch that hard. I was like, there's no way I can make it in the major leagues. I mean, I remember thinking that on the mound. I was like, that's unbelievable. To the pull side, he's the opposite field guy. To the pull side, I'm like, oh my God. But as far as first encounters with Joey in the big leagues, no, I don't. There's not one that sticks out to me. Because like we talked about at that time, I'm pretty outgoing. Joey, not so much then. There wasn't. So, everybody's drawn to their like type of people, and Joey wasn't mine. I mean, Joey was in kind of a different world than I always say. And, with utmost respect to this situation, like I refer to Joey, as some type of like an autistic savant. Like he was so focused on what he was doing, and that's what made him great, but it's what made him, less personable at that time. I mean, in your dealings with, you dealt with him more than I did, for sure. That's just what it was. I mean, it was always friendly. Hey, what's up? We weren't best friends by any means. There was a time maybe towards the end where he was living around here and so was I. And, we tried kind of to get together, but he was traveling or I was traveling or whatever the case may be. But he was a ball. I mean, he was a baller, dude. I mean, the guy could hit. I mean, it was fun to watch, and it was just so locked in, and there was nothing else kind of going on around him. So it was pretty amazing. But no, there isn't one. And believe me, I racked my brain. I felt this coming, but there was not one thing that stood out to me.
Well, I like the story about the
minor league where I was about to quit before I ever made it.
Story that we can call that one how Votto almost ended Sam LeCure's career before
on a backfield in Sarasota
started. I'm really happy that you persevered and went on to do what you did, because here we are today.
Yeah,
so that's good.
Here we are today.
Last thing, just observing him, and he did a little short shout out in his Instagram post about, thanking his parents and his brother and all that along the way. But near the top of that list of thank yous was Freddie Benavidez, longtime guy in the Red system. And, we all saw it. Freddie works with a lot of people, but you could see early on that Votto and Freddie had a different kind of relationship. And he said in his post, he called Freddie one of his two guys, quote, my guys, who helped me be a big leaguer.
Leon Roberts.
And he said they made me the player I was. What'd you see with Votto and Freddie, or what about Freddie from your relationship with Freddie? What made him that guy?
If anybody cared that I ever retired, I mean, as far as once I got into the Reds organization, Freddie and Mac Jenkins are the two guys that I first remember meeting kind of on the scene. I went straight to Billings. But when I went down to instructional league that year, like I almost remember where I met them on the field, and I didn't even remember what Sarasota looks like anymore, but I kind of remember where I ran into them. And, I mean, Freddie's unbelievable. Like you don't stick around the game as long as he has for no reason. I mean, Freddie just has this way about him. We've talked about what he says to Noelvi Marte, where they'll go over to the lineup card and say, who's better than you? I mean, it was kind of that way. And respectfully to everybody else, it had nothing to do with anybody else. It just had to do with that guy. Right. And that's kind of how I felt like it was with Joey. Joey maybe liked the way that he hit fungos. I mean, there's something like that. You run into a guy that throws batting practice. You love how he throws batting practice.
Right.
For me, throwing a bullpen, I loved how Mike Stefanski caught a bullpen. Like, the target he gave, like that's who I would want to throw to before going into the game to warm me up. If he wasn't available, so be it. But that was my preferred guy. So I think the same with Joey. And I think you start to have a relationship with somebody and you see the fruits of your labor. He wins the Gold Glove. That would lead you to want to stick with that guy, right? If I'd have won a Cy Young, I'll be damned if I wouldn't have had Corky Miller as my personal catcher every 5 days I was running out there, right? I mean, you stick with what works. And Freddie worked with him, and Freddie just has just such a calm demeanor about him. We talk about Nick Lodolo kind of floating through the yard without a care in the. I mean, Freddie's that way, but he loves to work, and those two, hit it off, and I can see why. Like I said, Freddie's been in this organization a long time, because you're not going to find. If I find somebody has a bad word to say about him, I'm gonna whip their ass. But otherwise, you ain't going to be able to find somebody to have a bad word to say about Freddie.
Perfect. Let's wrap up today. There'll be more Votto discussion. I know, like you said, you're gonna think about this more.
Oh, yeah.
You're gonna be forced to think about this more because you're gonna be asked about it more.
Right.
We'll do more later. But quickly, to wrap things up with the stretch, you go from one of your former teammates who's exiting the game to another who just got back in. Johnny Cueto, 37, 38 years old, made his return for the Angels against the Royals in Kauffman Stadium. Quality start, almost 2 runs, gave up a home run, I think, in the 6th inning. But he goes a quality start, loses to former Red Michael Lorenzen, which is a different part of the story. But Cueto got a standing ovation in Kansas City as he left the mound, because in 2015, that's where Cueto went and ended up winning a World Series ring with the Royals. But the thing that struck me about Cueto is he's got all those things.
Yeah.
He's got his ring. He's got his money. He's got his resume. He's had his moments and his highlights and played for some great teams. And yet he fought through the minor leagues most of this season just to get back and have that moment. I don't know how many more moments there will be, but he spent most of the year in the minor leagues to get there. What you know about Cueto, why? What drives that guy that allowed him to do that at this age and at this stage in his career?
I mean, you see like the difference in my face talking about John,
Yes.
because I mean, Johnny was more of the guy that I would gravitate towards Joey. And that's not that's just a reflection, I guess, of me. Yeah. And I mean, Johnny lights me up, man. Like I loved the days Johnny pitched. I loved Johnny before that. And I love what he's doing now. And I think that the love that I feel like towards him, I think he has towards the game of baseball, man. Like, and if you've ever been to San Pedro de Macorís, you'd want to get the hell out of there too. The Dominican Republic, which I have been down there, and God love those people, man. They're sweet people. And I learned a lot about myself down there. But for Johnny, why not, man? I mean, it's the best job in the world. Not to make it about me by any means, but I wish that I would have done a little bit more of that. I wish I would have scrounged around in the minor leagues a little bit, because I still loved playing ball. But for Johnny to do that and make it back, it was almost like the Joey scene, like where he would have made it back in Toronto. When Johnny gets the only stadium in, other than maybe Great American Ballpark that he was going to get a standing ovation in, is Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, winning the ring. And then to go off against a former teammate, I don't know if him and Michael played together, but
I think they did,
maybe, but really, really awesome. And he's still out there. Like, I love that the memes are back. He's out there doing the shimmy. It's like, Johnny Cueto, you're drunk. It looked like he was drunk out there. I mean, he's falling all over the place, but the dude's making pitches. I mean, 6 1/3, I think it was 8 hits, 3 runs, 2 walks, and 1 strikeout. It don't matter, man. Like the dude, he was doing it for the White Sox last year, wherever. This guy can pitch. And that's why. I think that's why.
Against a notably offensively talented team.
Yeah, right?
I mean, right?
We just saw them demoralize Reds pitching staff that had been pretty good. So for Johnny, that was awesome. I hope I don't watch a lot of baseball other than the Reds. every 5 days, if Johnny's pitching somewhere, I'll definitely be taking a look at that. So good for him. And congratulations to Joey on a great career. Johnny's still going. He wants that Dominican wins record, I think. Maybe that's part of it too.
Maybe that's it. Maybe. I love those stories. And yes, from someone who covered Joey Votto from the time he was AA through his time in Cincinnati, congratulations on an unbelievable career. And congratulations on doing it the way he did it. You know what? I respect anybody who sticks to who they are and what they believe and how they do it. And it didn't always make life easy for the media. It didn't make life easy, I'm sure, for some of his teammates. But, you know, that's how he knew and that's what he did. And I respect that all day long. And I think we'll be having this Cooperstown conversation in 5 years about number 19 and some more days in Cincinnati and Great American Ballpark to honor and remember some of those moments he had with those teams.
I believe that.
Sam, good to be back. Wrap us up, please.
Well, thanks, Brian, for showing up. No, I'm not even going to go. Don't get me started. Yeah, I'm glad Brian was moving kids into college while I was back here slaving away, working, all that good stuff. Seeing Tyler Childers while I'm back here working, talking about the Reds getting swept. No. I wish you well in the wars to come, my friend. No, I'm kidding, dude. What is that? No, well, because I'm gone next week.
I know.
So I hope you have a little better luck than I do. But yeah, subscribe, send us some comments about things you might like to hear about Joey Votto, Johnny Cueto, or this 2024 Reds team, and we'll dig into those a little bit and see if we can't do a little mailbag or something like that next week. But YouTube, we'll post them on social media. So, and other than that, you guys just have a lovely day.